So welcome back to another developer session. Today we're going to be implementing a new skill with a new QTE. The general idea is we're going to have a setup. Let me just draw this here. We're going to have a skill that slashes across all the enemies in the scene. And what that's going to the QTE that's going to be associated with that. So let's say we have enemy 1, 2, and 3. Starting from the enemy that the player is targeting, we're going to have a face button indicator in front of each of the targets. And that's going to be pressed in order from left to right. And each enemy that so let's say we have the A button, the X button, and the B button. If the player targets the first enemy, they'll hit A, the focus will shift to the second enemy, and the player will hit X, and the focus will shift to the third enemy, and the player will hit B. And assuming they hit all three of those, each enemy will get hit with the attack. Now, if they hit the first QTE, miss the second one, the QTE will fail, but the first enemy will still get hit. Alternately, if they target the second enemy first, there will be no QTE on the first enemy. The second enemy, the player will just hit X and then B to hit the second and third enemy in the lineup. And I haven't quite decided if that's going to cost less SP to use or if there's any actual difference in the cost of using the skill. But that's the general idea for what we're going for today. So first off, we have our focused enemy selection. The player will not be able to change the focus. I've got a little list of features I need to remember to take care of here. But the player will not be able to change the focus while the QTE is in process. So they have to actually fail out of the QTE to perform any other action against a different enemy. Or even any action in general. They can't heal while they're doing the QTE and all the standard stuff that I believe we accounted for last time. So first off, let's go ahead and take a look at our QTE code. It's been a little while since I've looked at this. So we have our QTE command factory that deals with showing the QTE. It deals with a single targeted parent, which is something we're going to need to change, or at least add on. This time, we don't have a single targeted enemy. Every enemy is the target. So, let's see here. So what's this guy do? He has a pool manager with a list of the QTE instances. We're going to load that up. Yeah, so this is going to be a little different. So our iQTE has an activate, a get results, engage, enable. So at the very least, we need a new QTE. So what are we going to call this? We will call this Simon Says Attack All. Since I can't really think of a better name for the concept of it showing us buttons and us repeating it. And from this I might extrapolate a base class that does a Simon Says with one target, but for now we'll start off with the premise that we're attacking all enemies. And this is going to implement iQTE, which gives us some stuff. So a couple properties and some methods. Is enabled, is interrupted. I believe these are just, is enabled, I think is just whether the component is enabled or not. also need to be a mono behavior. And is interrupted, I believe, is... yeah. There's probably enough stuff in between all of these to create an abstract class to be derived from that implements mono behavior in IQTE. So we'll probably come back around at the end of this and do that, but for right now. So when we activate, and when we interrupt, alright, so that's fine. So how are these other guys working? So our guard QTE has a lot of stuff dealing with setting up the rings and the UI and everything. But at the end of the day, we have a get engage and get result. So engage is what happens when the player presses the button to execute the QTE. Now, is this called from inside or outside? This is called from outside in our QTE command factory. If the input button down is engage button, then we're going to engage. So I can already tell we're going to have something a little different here. We'll probably have a different method that is show multi-part QTE or show multi-target QTE or some mechanism as far as that goes. And we'll still offer the is interrupted. So we do have this interrupt attached to QTE guard. When does this get called? This is if, so this is when the target dies while we're doing this, which, you know, that could be an issue, right? So let's say we have target 1, 2, and 3, and we're doing the QTE, but target 2 dies. You know, we need to focus onto the third enemy, and we need to maintain we need to augment the order of the QTE button inputs that we're looking for, as well as making sure that there's some kind of forgiveness for, like, if the enemy dies as the player is pressing the button, like maybe the enemy's poisoned or something, or has a, you know, overtime status effect that's causing damage or something like that. You know, maybe it does a suicide attack, or, you know, any combination of things could result in the enemy dying while we're in the middle of some operation, and that would interrupt it. But, you know, if the player presses the button at that exact point in time, well, they're kind of SOL as far as successfully doing the QTE. So I don't know. Well, you know, maybe we'll solve that here. Maybe we'll worry about that later when we actually have that scenario. But, you know, it pays to think ahead. At the very least, we need to leave a note for future Chris to take care of that. So Simon says attack all. And we need some properties. So this guy deals on enable, setting up its visuals, and on disable, it unhooks from a bunch of stuff. We need to be given a array of enemies that we're going to deal with. Yeah, we're gonna set that here. So So we're going to assume that the enemy's property needs to be set before this is called. It cannot be modified during the QTE execution. So in that case, though, we're going to go ahead and yeah, ultimately I guess it's the same exact thing. So let's see here. So first off, what do our enemies actually look like? We have our prefabs in here. Enemy prefab, expand the folder, come on. And we have our enemy units. Yeah, combat enemy unit is our prefab for an enemy in battle. It has an enemy, it's got a battle behavior AI controller, placeholder for the model, canvas, and a collider that may or may not still be useful. I'm not sure. Now, so let's pull one of these into the scene itself. Take a good look at him. Oh yeah, I don't believe that battle detection is actually being used. But let's see here. So we got our canvas. Canvas is pretty, pretty wide there. All it's got is the enemy display. Now we already attached the attack QTE to the canvas, I believe. And where would that be? As the player, we do the attack enemy. So we do the start coroutine, factory, show QTE. Yeah, so the enemy canvas has this UI manager object, so we are just parenting this attack QTE to it. So, fact of the matter is, so we need a couple things, right? And I'm going to go ahead and leave myself some notes here. So we need OneNote likes to not render a bunch of stuff. So we need new prefab that shows a controller base button image based on an enumeration that we give it. That part needs to be parented as part of the show QTE. So when we call this, we're going to say show all target QTE, and we're going to give it an array of targets, which will be an array of actors. Or actually really just an array of transforms. I mean, ultimately we don't really care about them being enemies. Though in our specific case, we do care about them being enemies, but the consuming code can do a get component to get the enemy object off of it, because we need to track if the enemy was killed or not. But we'll take each of those transforms, we'll attach our button display to it, randomly decide which buttons are going to go on which enemies, and then we'll use that that decided set of buttons to determine the input we're going to check for in the QTE. Now, the execution of the QTE is very specific to this, right? We're looking for 4 different button presses and not just one button. So I suppose we could continue to do that outside of the QTE itself. We could do that here within this guy, and this becomes, rather than just a check for this one button, we check for, we start a, this is already in a coroutine. We don't need to do this while, well, the while enabled tells us if it's been interrupted or not. Either way, though, we'll change this to accept potentially multiple inputs, and then continue on as normal with the interruption or the completion based on whether we've shut down the QTE interface through the engage method. Yeah. Okay, this sounds good. This sounds like we're getting places. So let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and make our whatchamacallit. Where's my folder for QTEs? UI. Object pool, there you are. Attack QTE pool, where are you? Battle prefabs. Okay, we're going to create a new folder, QTE. That's going to come on out here. So quite frankly, QTEs could be more than just battle. Attack QTE, guard prompt. Those are only 2 QTEs at the moment. Oh, whoops. And we're going to have a new object. So we still got our test enemy here, so we can go ahead and create this guy. So we need a canvas is flipped 180. That's fine. So our images from our perspective here will look backwards, but that's just because they're set up so that they're facing the player, not the enemy. So we're going to create a new UI. I guess we don't really need more than just the image, do we? Like, it doesn't need to be a panel or anything like that with a background or any such thing. So our source image of a sprite, we have a set of things, don't we? Where did I put that? I have a set of sprites and textures that I use for the gamepad imagery, keyboard imagery, and things like that. I guess I put it here under game assets textures, which, I mean, quite frankly, it should get moved out. Health slider background. Okay, I guess that's a custom thing I did. These aren't really going to change too much though. So really I should drop that down here into textures. So let's go ahead and do that. There we go. So we'll operate off the Xbox 360 controller for now. So we got these couple sprites. Yeah. I hate when you're updating the name of something, it stops a little bit in and moves the caret index to the front of the word. That's super annoying. Now, in my face button display, yeah, we just reference the image itself. So yeah, I mean, based on the controller the player selects, which I'm going to give them the option to choose a controller layout. Not necessarily detected based on the controller they're actually using, but which one they prefer. I mean, I'm fine with either or, but I'd like to let them choose, okay, well, I'm used to a PlayStation controller. Even though I'm using this Logitech controller, I want to see the square, triangle, circle, X. Or the Xbox controller, but we're going to come back and do that later. So I think for right now, where's my QTE folder? Face button prompt controller. And actually, face button display controller HUD. I believe this is already exposed through the HUD manager. So presumably I can get the sprites that I've allocated for the face buttons from here. So I don't need to instantiate new sprite instances and set them up or anything like that. Yeah, because I already know about, or rather, image top, image left. Yeah, face button display controller knows about these images. So I can continue referencing things based on position. And I can get the sprite from that. So public sprite, get sprite from position. Alright, so there's that. Face button prompt controller. So we need a reference. To the image, which, yeah. Should work. So we have our test enemy with our image here. This is going to be a face button prompt. Oh, because the name of our class and our file are different because of that rename. So wait for this to update. And wait for it to update. There we go. Face button prompt controller. It's got an image. We know about it. Hide the image by default. Preserve aspect, true. And that should do it. I mean, quite frankly, we don't need an object pool for this. This is a very lightweight prefab as far as things go, especially with the image turned off and no texture assigned to it. Like, there's no actual unmanaged resource or anything associated with this object. So we'll use this purely for yeah, well, it'll just be purely unpooled. And honestly, I mean, at that point, I don't really feel any hesitation from, you know, just leaving it attached if there's nothing on it. And quite frankly, it's very lightweight. Like, there's no harm in this just being on the enemy. Like, we don't even need to instantiate it. Yeah, I think that's the trick. That's what I'm going to do, is I'm just going to leave it here. Like, this is perfectly fine. And we'll update our prefab for our enemy unit, our enemy combatant, rather. However, our what was that? The enemy display controller or something like that. It's on the canvas. Yeah, enemy UI manager. Yeah, I don't think any of this stuff is actually called anymore. Yeah. That was old. So, with that all in order, wait for this to update and we'll reassociate our, put our face button prompt there. Apply this back to the prefab, and we no longer need him. Actually, we will hide that by default. Now, back to our QTE. So we have our face button prompt controller, we have our Simon Says Attack All controller. And we're being given an array of enemies. Rather, we're giving an array of transforms. Right? Now, you know what? We'll revert that for a minute. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's take a look at our QTE command factory. So, we're going to do a very similar thing here, right? So we're going to do a public enumerator show multi-target QTE. And what do we need to know? We need to know the key. But the key is really only used for the object pool, which we're not using in this. Excuse me, a little tired. It's about coffee time, but yeah, we're not using our object pool for this, so we don't exactly need a key, but we do need a key in the sense that we need to know what type of QTE it's going to be. Like, we know it's multi-target, but we don't know it's the face button QTE or that it's the Simon Says Attack All QTE. Or, I mean, I know I said I wasn't going to use the QTE, but maybe I want to just do it anyways to be consistent. Like, we're not exactly gaining a lot, but we're also not really losing anything either. But we do maintain consistency with our key system. I'll think about that in a few minutes. So, let's say, actually we are about hitting the 40-minute mark. So maybe we'll call that part 1, and we'll come back in part 2. We'll figure out what to do with our show QTE and setting up our Simon Says Attack All QTE to make use of the face button prompt controller. And actually, after that we'll need to check the inputs and actually engage the QTE. And then actually engage the skill that we'd set out to start with. So we have a few parts worth of stuff to do. So, I don't mind breaking this up a little bit early. Get myself some coffee. So thank you for watching, everyone, and I will see you next time.